Hey everyone, today I want to give you guys some insight as to how I might pre-fish a new area. The assumption is that this new area I've never been to, so I don't have any intel in terms of where I should be launching, and I don't have any GPS marks in terms of where I should be fishing. So when I am pre-fishing a new area, typically I will always start with Google Maps. Google Maps will give you a macro or bird's eye view, if you will, of the area that you are going to be potentially fishing. And as most of you know, I'm based out of the Southern California, Los Angeles area, and Redondo Beach is kind of like my home turf. Now the area that I'm thinking about fishing is about an hour drive up north. It's the Oxnard Ventura area, and it is here. So I'm gonna take Google Maps and kind of zoom in on that specific area. Okay, so it looks like there is a harbor of some sort. And from the little bit of research that I've done, most kayak fishermen will kind of launch from somewhere within this harbor. So right off the bat, I see that there is a break wall, and more notably, this break wall is not connected to land, which means that it's not going to get hammered by the shore-based fishermen. So your average angler isn't going to be able to get out to this jetty wall and fish the outside. So I might be interested in fishing maybe a portion of this wall initially. Furthermore, because I am presumably launching from inside a harbor, I'm not super concerned about which way the swells are coming from, because again, it's a protected harbor launch. So now I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Okay, with this more macro view, now I can begin thinking about, alright, once I get past this jetty wall, okay, if there's no action here, where am I going to fish? And of course, right off the bat, I see that there is a big underwater canyon here. Now this kind of underwater topography is actually very similar to Redondo Beach, which is where I typically fish out of. Right? So this is Redondo Beach, and it has a similar kind of underwater canyon. So I'm going to go back to the area here. And so while I've never fished this particular area, I have fished an area that is similar in appearance in terms of underwater topography. So right off the bat, if given a choice, would I rather be fishing here in the flats, or do I want to focus my efforts on the underwater canyon? That's a no-brainer. Okay, I know that any kind of underwater structure like this is going to typically attract and hold more fish. In addition, I am pre-planning this trip in late December, so the water's colder. Now if it was summer, I might think about working the flats here or here, and maybe troll for halibut. But typically, when the water gets colder, you kind of focus your efforts in on rockfish, and that means underwater structure like this. Going back to the map, I'm going to zoom out. Now, in addition to the really big underwater canyon here, you have some smaller canyons and drop-offs here, here, and here. And again, typically the further away from the launch point you go, the less pressure the fish are going to get. So I'm going to kind of take out the ruler and see if this is actually doable via kayak. So I'm going to click on the ruler here. And then you can kind of focus in on this area of the window because it'll show you the distance from one point to another. So I'm going to put 1 point here, and then I'm going to kind of navigate to the point of this canyon, and that's about 4.5 miles. This one is about 5.5 miles, and this one is 6.27. Now again, I'm doing this in December and we have shorter days, and this is a new area, so I don't think it's really wise or maybe even feasible for me to be thinking about launching and paddling over 6 miles one way. So I'm probably gonna end up focusing this area here, and from the launch to this point is about 2 miles. This is about 3 miles. Yeah, about 3 miles would probably be my limit. Now that I know that I'm going to be working about this area here, I gotta try and maybe guess as to what portion of the underwater canyon I'm going to be working. Now I know that I cannot fish the channel, the bottom of the channel itself, because it's just way too deep. So first of all, in SoCal, you cannot fish beyond 360 feet. And so if you look here, you know that this area is over 700 feet. So that's definitely out. Now that puts me at which ledge will I be fishing? Will I fish the northern ledge, or do I fish the southern ledge? Now I know from experience that in Redondo Beach, it seems like the southern ledge typically has more fish. And again, like I mentioned in a previous video, it could be the fact that the prevailing currents run from north to south, but that's the situation in Redondo Beach. Once I have decided which ledge I'm gonna fish, I'm going to start dropping some waypoints. So I will start kind of mousing around and looking for areas where the elevation is something between, let's say, 100 and 200. So this right here, for example, fits the description. It's about 150 feet and it's right on a ledge. So I'm going to drop a waypoint here, and I'm going to name it something like try 1. Okay, and then of course Google Maps will give you the GPS coordinates. So I'll drop one there, and then I might drop another one, let's say around here. Again, this is about 127 feet and the GPS coordinates are here. So I'll drop one there. And really, I might, drop 3-4 more. And once I drop all the coordinates that I'm thinking about fishing, I just basically zigzag, okay? Working the seam or the edge of the ledge. I just zigzag with the waypoints as my general guide. From there, it's really just a matter of putting in some miles with one eye on the sonar. Now, once I've put together a pre-plan in terms of where and how to fish, I'm going to turn my attention to the safety aspects. So typically, for a quick and dirty look, I first turn to spitcast.com. I set the area as Ventura and I look at a 7-day. So today, as I mentioned, it's late December and it's a Saturday. So I'm assuming that I'm doing the pre-planning for, let's say, Sunday, which is tomorrow. So the swells look pretty manageable, okay, around 3 feet. And again, I'm not familiar with the specific points, but if I just focus in on this general column, regardless of the point, a specific point, the surf is generally going to be mellow. Anything under like 3 feet is good. The wind, again, I'm going to focus in on Saturday, Sunday here. Wind is very, very mellow. Anything under 5 is pretty good. Actually, I would call it extraordinary, even for Southern California. The tide we will address later. So again, Spitcast will give you a quick and dirty look as to the overall conditions. From there, I go to a different site that kind of puts everything together in terms of safety and fishing conditions. And that is tidesforfishing.com. And this is probably as comprehensive a picture as you're going to get. So I'm gonna scroll down here. Barometric pressure, if you're into that kind of thing, generally speaking, anything rising is pretty good for fishing, and we know that the conditions, it's a rising barometric pressure, so it looks pretty good. I'm going to scroll down some more. Okay, here are the swell conditions. Now we know that the swells are going to be coming out of the southwest, and it's going to be mellow, again 2.6. And the wave period, as you can see, the needle is in green, so there's going to be a lot of lull between the bumps, so it's going to be a very, very mellow ride. So if you have a wave period like that's really, really short, like 3 seconds, it's gonna be like you're in a washing machine. So in general, the swells and the wave period tell us that it's gonna be a very, very mellow ride. This kind of puts the wind into perspective here. I'm sorry, the swells again throughout the day. Now, here's something really interesting. So this little graph tells us when the high tide and when the low tide is going to be. But more than timing, look at the amplitude. So at 8 a.m. is going to be peak high tide. Okay? Now in Southern California, typically the ultimate peak is going to be about 7. And the ultimate low is going to be about -2. So if you have a high tide at around, I don't know, it looks like about 6.5, 7, that's a really high tide for SoCal. And the fact that it's going to be something like -5, it means it's going to be a very, very low tide for SoCal. So what does that mean? What is the significance of such a high high and a low low? Well, let me try to explain here. Okay, so again, here in SoCal, this blue line represents the ultimate high, and the red line represents the ultimate low in terms of SoCal. So we're gonna go from high tide of 6.8 feet at around 8 a.m. to -1.4 around 3:30. So the significance is to go from that high to this low, a lot of water has to move, right? So if you have a high of, let's say, 3 and a low of, let's say, 1, okay, the amplitude is much, much smaller. And not much water has to move from +3 to +1. But again, this day is pretty extraordinary. You go from a high of 6.8 to a low of -1.4. And by the way, negative 1.4 means if you are into like tide pools and stuff, you're gonna be able to wade out like 200 yards and see all of the flora and fauna that would typically be underwater. So in essence, there's going to be a lot of water movement, and typically fish like water movement. Strong water movement and currents mean there's going to be a lot of stuff being swirled up, a lot of bait fish being moved around. So a good day. So I know that if I'm planning to fish Sunday, it's gonna be very close to a full moon. And typically with full moons and no moons, because of the effect of the gravity of the moon, you're going to have the greatest amount of water movement when there's a full moon or a no moon. Okay, and then this number right here, they call the coefficient. It basically summarizes all of the different components. And the higher the number, the better the fishing ought to be. Okay, I say ought to be. It doesn't guarantee success, but the elements are in your favor. So we know that on Sunday it's going to be 98, which is a very high number. This number will vary from like low 30s typically to high 90s. So Sunday is going to be a really good day. And visually, they say the fish activity should be pretty darn good. So that about wraps it up. I've kind of given you some insight as to the kind of pre-planning and scouting that I do before I hit a new body of water. And of course, it goes without saying that when you go paddle a new body of water, you want to be safe. So if I'm fishing Redondo Beach, I may not have redundancy in terms of navigation or communication. But definitely, when I go fish a new body of water, I make sure everything is redundant. So I have redundant communications and redundant navigation. So really all that's left is for me to actually go up there and fish the area. And my next video will kind of summarize what the fishing was actually like in comparison to what the conditions might portend. By the way, if you are a catch and cook guy or gal and you want to join me on an adventure, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. Thanks again for dropping by, and good luck out there.